left me alone, but still you're my own in my beautiful
The war was over and my dad was coming home to pick up the pieces of his business and his life like so many others. But for everybody around that time it was a time of readjustment, and I was only 8 years old. We were still living in the house behind the shop, but the upstairs bedrooms had been demolished. We all slept in the spare room downstairs, my mum and dad in one bed, my grandma and me in the other. Within not much more than a year, the government had started building prefabricated houses on the corner only 100 yards from the shop, and we managed to get one right on the corner. These were some of the better ones, with concrete exterior walls rather than the more common asbestos, and they were well laid out. I'm still picturing it in my mind. My mum and dad had the front bedroom, while me and my grandma slept in the back one. But in the living room, best of all, my dad had bought a new 12-inch black and white TV. Television was the latest thing, and I was soon hooked. I think my first proper bike was a reward for winning a place at grammar school. My grandma liked a daily glass or two of Guinness. She'd run out, so could I go on my bike down to the off-licence, take the empties back and get some more. It was nearly time for my favourite TV show. I was going at top speed when the neck of a bottle in the bag on my handlebars went in the front wheel. I saw it over the handlebars, did a somersault and landed on my face. I took a lot of skin off my face, but also lost a front tooth, broke my nose and had huge swollen lips. I looked like something out of a horror film, so I wanted to go back to school so I could scare the girls. Plaistow Grammar School was quite a distance for me to travel on the bus, and there were always an awful lot of antics on the bus, particularly upstairs. I think I lost a school cap every few weeks. Plaistow Grammar probably wasn't the best of schools, but I had some good times there, even though probably I didn't work as hard as I should have done. But more of that later. The school is still there, but now it's just a sixth form college. At home, my dad had almost restored the shop, if not the living quarters behind it, to its former glory, and it was doing very well. Then just before I reached the age of 12, only 6 months after I'd started grammar school, my mum gave birth to my brother, Alan. That in itself was sure to bring about a lot of changes. But then also, my grandmother, who played such a big part in the shop and my upbringing, sadly died less than a couple of years later. There also came some more bad news. The shop was listed for demolition. My dad consequently decided it was time for us all to move on. I think that it was in 1952 that we moved out of the prefab and had to live for a while with my mum's mum and dad and her sister Joan in Portray Street, Poplar. My dad had decided to sell the shop for what he could get in the circumstances. As it happened, later it turned out to be a really good deal for the buyer, because in fact it wasn't demolished for years. During my final year of grammar school, I had two highly creative but rather offbeat friends, Mike Crawley and Johnny Mortimer. Mike Crawley wrote a little piece of nonsense verse, which for some reason I can still remember. Lydia is a silly name to call a lion semi-tame, especially with a sea green mane. Google birdie. I don't know what happened to Mike, but Johnny Mortimer would later become the trombonist in the famous Acapulco band. I didn't often get in trouble at school, but we had this German teacher, whose Christian name was Winnie. She was short, dumpy, with curly ginger hair and freckles. She didn't know how to control a class, so a lot of the class took advantage. Before she came into class, a number of us would crouch down between the rows of desks and over-breathe. Then the moment she entered the room, we stood up, put our thumbs in our mouths and blew. It made us faint. She was, as a result, faced with several pupils passing out onto the floor, which would send her, understandably, into a panic. She gave me 100 lines at one stage, but forgot to tell me what lines I had to write. I wrote them at home, 4 lines at a time, with 4 different coloured pens taped together. My dog's name is Winnie. Winnie is a bitch. It was all, in fact, absolutely true, but that didn't stop me being sent to the headmaster to be caned. Now at Poplar, cycling had become a passion. I started going on long cycle rides nearly every Sunday with the boy who lived next door in Poultry Street. I also, incidentally, had a crush on his sister. It was my final year at grammar school and time for my GCE exams, as they were then known. I'd actually done quite well in the mock GCSEs the previous year, but when it came to the real thing, there were far too many distractions to do much revision. Exams that I'd just managed to pass before, I now failed. 1 pass only in mathematics. You can imagine. My dad had now bought a new shop with living quarters behind it. It was further out, in Rush Green, Romford. We moved. In the circumstances, my parents managed to get me back to resit my final year in a grammar school in this new area. The Royal Liberty School in Gidea Park was once a country house that had now a large, more modern section built behind it and was a good school. I did work harder and got better results, a further 6 subjects, but...
So okay, Mr. Headmaster, I admit it. It was me that on my last day of school put shorting wires in some of the classroom switches so the lights could not be turned off. And it was also me that covered quite a lot of the light switches with syrup. It was not me, however, that put the electrically fired bangers under the teachers' chairs during the final assembly, although I might just have had some technical involvement.
Was it just a coincidence then? They recommended that I should go into electronics.